Bod the Podcast with your host, Mike May.
Welcome back, everybody. Today is March 29th, 2024. The Carolina Hurricanes are 74 games into the season with a record of 46, 21, and 7. Good enough for 99 points. Second in the Metro, second in the East, and third in the NHL. On the episode today, we're going to quickly recap the games from last week, jump into what a future Seth Jarvis contract extension may look like, and then discuss the games coming up in the next week. Jumping into games from last week, starting at home, March 24th, versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hurricanes come out on top of that game 2-1. Travel to Pittsburgh on the 26th. 4-1 loss there. Back at home on the 28th versus Detroit. 4-0 win there. Toronto game is two teams that are looking to compete for a Stanley Cup. I think the Hurricanes played really well. We're going to talk more about Freddie once we get through these games, but Freddie was a major part of the victory there. Fast forward to the Pittsburgh game. It's a classic case of the old goalie coming to bite you, that being Alex Nedeljkovic. This happens a lot, it seems, with former Canes goalies. They like to come, whether it's at Carolina or Canes are traveling, they love to play their best hockey and look like Vezina caliber goalies when the Hurricanes show up. It happens. Ned played a great game. Hurricanes didn't play their best hockey. All in all, that results in a 4-1 loss to a bad Pittsburgh Penguins team. But they right the ship, a sign of a good team. They come back home against Detroit, 4-0 win, shutout for Freddie. The team looks very dominant. Don't score in the first, don't score in the third, but absolutely blow the Red Wings out of the water in the second period, as the Hurricanes should, which then leads to the Hurricanes clinching their 6th consecutive playoff berth. And for a franchise that went through some very dark years, it is really easy to now take for granted the fact that we've consistently been there. The culture change has been fantastic. There's no denying it. The management team, ownership, coaching staff, the players, every part of it has become a winning franchise now. And there's only one thing left to do for them to cement the plan or to finalize their plan, right? Like, all this work that's been done is to ultimately win a Stanley Cup and create a winning culture, and they're knocking on the door. The team has an opportunity to do it this season, but we've gotten to the point where we now expect the playoffs, and that's a good place to be. But also, don't forget where we were. Enjoy it, because it can go away very quickly for a small market team. We are a hockey market, but we're a small market, and these things can be fleeting. I can't highlight enough how good Freddie has been since he's come back. We talked about it. He's a trade deadline acquisition at the end of the day. Doesn't play till post-trade deadline, and he's looked phenomenal. 2-1 win against Toronto. 32 saves on 33 shots for a 970 save percentage. Just excellent goaltending. And then against Detroit, 24 save shutout. And his last 5 games, he's been excellent. When you're looking at a 5-game stretch where 938 save percentage and 2 goals against is your worst outing, those are the kind of numbers from a goalie that can carry you all the way to a cup. And that's what this team needs. It seems like the scoring depth in the lineup is going to be there now with the additions of Kuznetsov, of Gensel. We know what we have on defense already. We know what we have when it comes to an aggressive forecheck and grinding style of play. You've got the goalie playing the way you need him to. You've added scoring pieces. Rod's tweaked the system enough to accommodate scoring while also allowing the Hurricanes to play their brand. So things are looking good for the Hurricanes at this point. We only have 8 games left in the season. At this point, like I mentioned on previous episodes, you want the team to stay healthy. You want there to be continued growth in terms of chemistry between the new teammates. And you want them to end the season on a high note. Now, ever since the 2020 and 2021 season that was shortened due to COVID, the Canes were on pace to win 53 games that season. In 21-22, they won 54. In 22-23, they won 52. The Canes are 4 games away from 50 wins, 4 wins away from 50 wins, which is certainly attainable for this team, which would put them in 4 consecutive years of a 50-win pace. And if you look back in the previous seasons, in 19-20, which was shortened due to COVID, they were on a 45-game win pace. And in 18-19, they won 46. Prior to 18-19, they didn't have a 40-win season outside of 2010-2011, which they won exactly 40 games. So now, since 18-19, this team has become consistently a 45-plus win team and has now put themselves in the category of a nearly 50, if not more, win team. It's great hockey. I know it's very easy to get sidetracked. And like I mentioned, it's great to have the expectation of winning a Stanley Cup. But where this franchise has come is phenomenal. For all the Canes fans out there that have been through the good times, the bad times, to get this consistency, to get the buy-in, to have the talent, it's just a great experience. So enjoy the ride. Be thankful for Freddie. Be thankful for the guys in the organization, and let's be there to root them on in the playoffs. Moving on, we're going to talk about Seth Jarvis, a guy that's been on an absolute tear for the Hurricanes. Like I mentioned on last episode, he perfectly represents what you want out of a Carolina Hurricane. He's a great fit for the organization. He's a player that Rod trusts, and Rod's trust can be hard to gain, but once you get it, you got it. It's hard to lose it once you got it, and Seth has certainly earned it. A really simple way to look at it, how Rod trusts you. In his rookie season, he played a shade under 14 minutes a game. His second year had a little bit of a slump, went from 40 points his rookie season to 39 in his sophomore season, but he played a little over 16 minutes. This season, he's nearly at 19 minutes a game. That's what trust looks like. You see Rod deploying him in all circumstances. He's taken some faceoffs all the way up to 175. He's taken over 300, it looks like. And he's winning them at a 45% clip. He's not afraid to throw his body around. Has over 100 hits this year. And for a guy that's considered undersized, that shows the tenacity that he plays with. At this point in the season, through 74 games, playing all 74 games, he's at 60 points this year. That's good enough for a little over 0.8 points per game. He's really developed into an excellent player, and the Canes are going to have to re-sign him in the offseason. I kind of tried to look at some comps and see who are some guys out there that I think you could kind of compare Jarvis to in terms of contract? I think the floor, which this is not what the Canes will sign him for, but I think that there's no way you go below this, would be Joel Farabee out of Philadelphia. He signed his contract extension back in 2021, 6 years, $5 million a year. Seth Jarvis is a better player than Joel Farabee, and don't get me wrong, Joel Farabee is a great player. He's very good in his own right, but Seth's going to get paid more than that, and Seth will hopefully have a term closer to 8 years as opposed to 6. Now, a guy that Seth may be close to in terms of value is Matt Boldy out of Minnesota, 7 years, $7 million a year, signed back in January of 2023. Now, Minnesota got that deal done early because they believed in the player. He's become a really standout player in Minnesota, like Seth has become. I think you're realistically looking at somewhere in the ballpark of, if you're looking at 8 years, I'm thinking at a minimum around 6 3/8, so 6.375 maybe. A max on that, maybe 7.25. So if we're looking to extend on a long-term contract for Seth Jarvis, 8 years, I'm thinking the absolute minimum you're paying him is 6.375. And I think the max you're paying him is probably 7.25 on an 8-year deal. The thing you have to keep in mind is the cap's going up. So both of these deals are signed prior to the cap increase. Now, you can argue that the expectation when Matt Boldy was signed was that the cap would go up. So I don't think it's too far off. But that's where my head's at in terms of comps. Now, I could be totally wrong. There could be better comps out there. These are guys that I found that I thought were good benchmarks. And we'll end up having to see where that shakes out. Now, if they go with a bridge contract, which could be, well, in my opinion, I'm not going to say could be. In my opinion, it's a bad idea because a player's Seth's talent clearly gels with guys that are already locked up with term, can play anywhere in the lineup, plays all facets of the game. You just want to have that guy tied to the organization for as long as possible. If we go shorter term, obviously those numbers are going to dip a little bit. You're probably talking, if we're going a 5-year, for example, we're probably talking sub 6 if we go on a 5-year deal. But hopefully the Canes are able to figure out a long-term deal, and Seth Jarvis is a Carolina Hurricane for a long time. Moving on, games next week. The Canes travel to Montreal tomorrow, March 30th, for their final game of March. And then they're back at home for a back-to-back on April 4th versus Boston, and then April 5th versus Washington. Let's see how the season shakes out. We'll be back next week. Take care.